Howdy! So today I'm going to show you guys how to re-gear a Puch Maxi. I'm changing the rear sprocket on a Puch Snowflake right there. Sorry, I've already started a little bit. I have these guys loosened, the axle nuts loosened, and the master link off the chain. So as you can see, that just spins right back, chain falls off. Oh yeah, I already took the brake cable off, that's important. So now this rear wheel is pretty much ready to come off. Brake plate will come off, then the gear will come off, and the new gear will go on. Don't feel intimidated by it. The only thing you do need to make sure you have is a long enough chain. When you go from a smaller sprocket to a larger sprocket, you're going to run into chain length issues. So keep that in mind. You can either get like add a link or new chain is good too. Yeah. Here we go. So I got my new gear from treatland.tv. Came pretty quick. I ordered it on, I think, Sunday, and I got it on Wednesday. So pretty fast turnaround time. Like I said, they're the best moped shop in the business. So make sure we got a 45 tooth gear. That keeps things working nice with the original gear ratio that this bike had. There's our old gear, there's our new gear. The spacing appears to be okay, but that can be adjusted once this is all apart. So just kind of pull on the brake plate, set it to loosen, and there we go. Sometimes these can take a while to come off, but just be patient. Like everything else mopeds, sometimes things take a while. So there we got the brake plate. We got fairly new brakes on there, and now we have access to the bolts for the rear sprocket. I believe, yes. So the threads do exist in the wheel. Don't strip them out, otherwise you've ruined the rear wheel. And that's, yeah. Unless you like doing that, go for it. There are little bent tabs on here. So a screwdriver and a mallet to hammer them flat. All right, these guys look a little bit smaller than the last one, so it'll probably take a 10. That's a pretty popular moped size. Let's see. And that fits. So one thing we can do, these aren't all the way down, so we can put the bit on, give it a whack, it'll push it more out of the way. Give you better access to the nut. Or the bolt. It's not a nut. And just kind of do like a crisscross pattern. I don't know if this is 100% necessary, but it's how we do it on cars, so I'm going to do it on a moped too. These aren't all that tight, thankfully. They're actually coming off pretty easily now. Now typically something I would do while I have the wheel apart like this is rebuild the bearings, but I've already done that. They're all shored up. They're really tight, like within reason. So the wheels spin quite nicely. Brakes work good, so I don't need to replace those since they're fairly new anyway. Yeah, so I got all the bolts out. I got the retaining pins off. And now hopefully this comes off easy. Sometimes after being stuck for, 40 years in one spot, things don't like to move. So just gotta influence a little bit. So here, I'm gonna take my ratchet, place it against the sprocket, and just tap it lightly. There we go. Rear sprocket is now off. Yeah, looks nice and clean. Not a lot of corrosion on there. There is dirt just because it's a moped. Yeah, so now we'll get this guy set right in on here. And that is a fairly tight fit. So just kind of rotate it. This has, I'm not sure if it's a coating, but it is kind of a rough finish to it, so that could be impacting the clearance here. Worst case scenario, just take a very small amount of sandpaper to it to kind of get rid of that coating, and then it should fit pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. There we go. All right, let's see if that did the trick. It's still a bit tight, but another trick too is to use leverage to our advantage. So I'm going to start threading in these bolts, and we'll use them to kind of suck it down on top of it. Be careful, you don't want to strip out the wheel. So take it easy when you're doing this. Kind of tap it as you go. Don't really crank down on it. Because as soon as you feel it give, you're kind of done. Again, with the star pattern, just kind of keep it all tightening equally. That's tightened down. I believe we are good to go. Look at the old sprocket here, which is nice and crusty. And we can just kind of line it up by eyesight, and it looks like they are the same offset. So this was in there, little washer that goes on first. Next is the brake plate, and then the spring return for the brake lever arm. As you can see, it likes to kind of get under there, so just kind of pry on it a bit, make sure it's in the right spot, and once it is, tighten it down. So pull the brake, it kind of centers everything up, and tighten it down. Make sure everything spins freely, which it does. That's good. And we are good to go. It's ready to go back on the bike. All right, so got the wheel, got the bike. Time to put everything back together. Keep in mind, if you are putting on new wheels or new tires, that they usually do have a direction. These ones are new, they're installed in the right direction, so I'm ready to put this all back together. So, as I did before off camera, tilt the bike a little bit, keep yourself on one side of it, and slide this wheel back into place. Now before you take the axle and slide it up into the axle housing, you want to run your pedal chain around the sprocket for the pedal. So now that won't get in the way. And then on the other side, you have the brake plate, which needs to line up with a little nub that's mounted right on the swing arm. You may not be able to see it on camera, but if you're actually working on a Maxi, you'll know where it is. So these are your retainers. Slip it over the axle and kind of tighten it down a little bit. And it'll keep the axle from sliding forward and off the mount. It's one for each side. And if your bike doesn't have them, highly recommend getting them. You can just tighten the axle down into place and call it good, but it's not exactly great for keeping the chain tensioned. Stuff can move around. It's always good to have these little tensioners. We got axle nuts, those go back on. Excuse me. And for now, we're not tightening anything down too hard because we're going to be putting the chain on next. On the other side of the bike, we're going to be putting the chain back on it. Like I said, I have a new master link, and here is the chain. This chain is already lubed up. If it's a new chain, I recommend lubricating it. So since this wheel isn't adjusted correctly, it is touching the swing arm just enough to cause it to rub. So it's a little harder than normal. Also, when refeeding the chain, it helps to take the side cover off. It gives you access to the whole chain route and the front sprocket to the engine. So, and once the chain kind of dangles off the front a little bit, grab a hold of that, use it to help you out a little bit more. Pull that through, and the chains should be very close to meeting up. As you can see, maybe I have one link in between that is missing. So because they don't reach now, and I have these tightened down pretty far, I can loosen the tensioner, which will allow the wheel to move forward, which will let me bring the two links together and slip on the master link and then retighten everything down. So there you can see, those are next to each other, and I can install my master link. So as you can see, we got our holes right there where our master link should go. So we first take this guy, feed it from the back through the holes to link them together. Then you put in the link next, and then the clip, which holds it all in place. And some people say, okay, you got to put it one way or the other. I've just kind of been putting them on any which way for almost the past 10 years and never had a problem with it. There we go, chain installed. As you can see now, this is all pretty loose, so we are going to tighten these guys up right here. They are 10mm, so we'll use the same socket that we used when we put the gear on. So I'm gonna tighten that up, and you can kind of see everything over here getting a little bit less loose the more we tighten it. You will want about 1 inch of play once everything's tightened down. We do have two sides to tighten. We do have to make sure that this sprocket and this sprocket line up with each other. So next up, we line up the chain. So as you can see right here, going all the way up to the front one. It's actually looking pretty dang good right now. The chain is actually a little bit more tight than I would like it, because the chain does tighten down a hair when you sit on the bike. So go ahead and tighten up the axle nuts on both sides, get this from flopping around as much, and then we can probably loosen these guys. This is an aftermarket exhaust. If you have a stock exhaust, they typically aren't in the way. So as you can see, that would be good loose, like a good tension if you were sitting on the bike, but for now it is too tight. So because that was so straight earlier, I'm going to loosen each one half a turn and then sit on the bike. And sitting on the bike will cause more tension on this, pulling the wheel forward enough and tightening that. It's gonna bounce and that should take care of it. You just want to make sure that these are snug. Don't crank on them, otherwise it'll readjust everything that you just tried to get. After you're all done with that, check your alignment again. And looks like we're good to go. Everything's all good there, all tightened down. We can put our side cover back on. There we go. We are all done replacing the rear sprocket on the Puch. Stay tuned and see you next time.